Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Nikki Bostwick Unfiltered podcast. I'm so excited to have Dr. Nathan Riley with us today. Dr. Nathan is the Chief Disruptor at Beloved Holistics, and he's the co-creator of the Born Free Method, which is the most comprehensive preconception through postpartum program on the planet. We met through my doctor, Dr. Habib Sadeghi, who I've had on before and talk a lot about. So immediately I felt this connection with you, Dr. Nathan, and you're up to so many amazing things, including the Twins Breach Conference, and I just love everything you represent in this movement. I feel like birth to me is just such a beautiful experience as a mom, but also just was such a big part of my journey and my awakening. Even though I felt like so awake and aware before, my life completely changed becoming a mom. And it was through my complications at my hospital birth that I learned to truly advocate for myself. And so these conversations are really interesting to me. And I was just so excited to be connected with you. And I'm so grateful to have you on today.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be a really fun conversation. I want to start with if you can just share a little bit about what brought you to create your own basically practice and then go on to the Born Free Method.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nikki. It was a fun connection there with Dr. Habib because he I met him at an anthroposophic medicine conference, which is, it's the medical extension of the work of Rudolf Steiner from the early 20th century. And to see a group of doctors there that are open-minded to this kind of stuff, which frankly sounds insane. Like when you try to read Rudolf Steiner and you intellectually try to kind of pick it apart and say, okay, I'm going to do this and this makes sense based on what I know about neurology and all that. It doesn't really come together. You have to actually kind of feel it. And having met, so many doctors through that place, and then for them to recommend me to you, and then for us to start working around your saffron products at Fullest. And those little synchronicities are something you also just kind of feel. You just kind of feel your way through it. And that same kind of process of feeling your way through navigating the potentials for a doctor, especially a male OBGYN, after you finish your training and being kind of disillusioned with where you find yourself, that was also quite a bit of feeling that kind of brought me to where I am now. And I'm like a real doctor. I have to say that to people. Yeah, like I'm a real deal. Like I'm the board certified OB and I'm a OBGYN and I'm a board certified hospice and palliative care physician. I'm dual board certified by major agencies. And I've decided to not do either of those specialties in the way that I was trained to do it. Because I thought that, or at least I felt that I could probably do things a little bit better than I was trained to do it. Because I don't necessarily think that most women or anybody even working in the system is necessarily all that thrilled with the type of care that they're getting. And you can say, well, what are you going to do about it? It's like, I don't know what I'm going to do about it. But I do know where I want to go with it. I do want women to feel safe, and I do want women to have less apprehension about going in to be evaluated. I think doctors have done quite a bit to perverse this physician-patient relationship in the sense that women and birthing families in general don't necessarily see the hospital as always the best place to go. They may still go there. 98% of women are giving birth in hospitals. They may still go there, but it may not feel great to them. But hey, what other option do I have? So I'm trying to create another option for people, which is not just like, hey, come give birth under my care and home. It's actually helping to get people to remember that you ultimately are the consumer of healthcare, and you're the one who knows your body the best. For you to walk into a clinic and be told it's all in your head, or, oh, that couldn't have been what happened to you, this gaslighting thing, that has ruined our relationship with our clientele. And I say clientele because, in the pregnancy sort of scenario, you're not sick just because you have a baby inside of you. You're not a patient. You don't need to be hospitalized for this. So that's like a part of the story. But furthermore, I think people think women, whenever they decide for themselves what they want to do, maybe for the first time in their whole life, you know what? I don't want to go to the hospital. They treat you like you're arrogant, you're stupid, you're incompetent, you're uneducated, you're irresponsible. They call child protective services. Like, this is a relationship that is so sacred, and we've allowed it to degrade in front of our eyes. And so when I found myself being nurtured to work in this system that has let so many women down, it was like, I don't have to do this. I don't have to keep being Mr. Nice Guy. I'm just going to say thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to go do this in another way. And I had to get very creative with how I did that. So now I run an online support program, I guess you could call it, that has hundreds of hours of content that my best friend and also birth attendant, Sarah Rosser, who trained on the farm in Summertown, Tennessee, and worked her whole career there until the COVID thing happened, which we should actually talk about COVID in a second, but because that's also a part of this story. But she and I were getting inundated with questions, and we just decided, hey, let's put together the best program that we can. And that it requires us to put together, video presentations and to have calls every other week. We bring in guest speakers, like all the big hitters in the maternity care and birth support space. We bring them in to have live conversations, and then people get direct access to me and Sarah for the rest of their reproductive life. That to me felt like this is what I would want. I don't get paid as much to do it that way. The program is a little bit pricier than other programs, but you're getting the ability to call me or text me anytime, and I will look it up. I will find the answer for you if I can't give it off the top of my head. So people like this, and we have some people that are having some really great experiences, whether it's an elective C-section or it's a free birth out in the middle of the woods. But whenever people hear about what I'm doing, especially OBGYNs, I thought that they were just being kind of sticks in the mud. Like, you do home birth and you're not advocating for everybody to get every vaccine, and you're speaking about perhaps the perils of birth control and that preeclampsia is preventable, and like gestational diabetes shouldn't be happening in the richest nation in the world. Like, they're acting like I'm a total crackpot. And I thought maybe they're just like, ignorance is bliss or something like that, And then there was recently an OBGYN with like 1 million followers who posted this thing just yesterday, actually. And it said something like, people are going to health influencers now for the majority of their information, at least a large portion of our population. And this doesn't make sense in her eyes. Like, I'm a doctor. There's a lot of doctors here. Why aren't you going to your doctor? Like, help me understand is actually what she put in the caption. And boy, oh boy, Nikki, if you read those comments, it tells you absolutely everything that we as doctors need to be hearing in order for us to right the ship, specifically in maternity care, but really in healthcare at large. So I responded with a comment that has now 100 likes. And help me understand why. That was the question. Help me understand why people are going to health influencers and not their doctors. My response was, it rhymes with schmovid. So I don't want the podcast to get taken down.
No, that is so good. Oh
I don't want this podcast to get taken down. I don't want anybody to see me as some sort of like conspiracy theorist, anti-vaxxer, because I'm not those things. I'm actually very, very much pro information, informed consent, and autonomy. And I know we can talk about abortion next, so we can just put a pin in that one. But these are hot topics, and the COVID moment really unveiled a lot of the machinations of this massive medical, military, industrial complex that is so expensive and does not seem to be doing us very much good. And the doctors out there had the opportunity to say, hold on, I am absolutely for every possible vaccine or preventative measure against any viral illness for young kids, for old people, whatever. And as a medical doctor, I demand that we have greater accountability and transparency in what's happening in this sort of assembly line, Rockefeller style of providing healthcare resources to people in our communities. And they didn't do that. So I don't think that they're bad people for doing that. However, I think it's important that this doctor who's asking, help me understand. I hope that they can appreciate that you shot yourself in the foot and you degraded that trust. It doesn't matter what I believe in about vaccines or whatever. It matters that they trust you. And you showed them that by not allowing people to ask questions and offering maybe even a just, I don't really know, but here's what I would do for my family. That's all you would have to say. But instead, you're compelling people to do these things and making them feel like they're bad, dirty, soiled. Again, it's like the same conversation around the free birthers or home birthers. You're making people feel like they're unsophisticated and inferior to you. And that is not good for building trust. So we've had this degradation now, which has led to a whole bunch of stuff which we can get into, which is very relevant to this election that just happened as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's get into the abortion situation, because there are so many people that are now living in fear that they're not going to be able to get the proper care that they need. I mean, first off, they muddied the waters by talking about miscarriage care and abortion care as the same thing.
Right.
And obviously that's like a really big difference there. And then so I'd love to talk about your experience, obviously, with your company and the care that you offer. You're working with people across the country.
Yeah.
I don't know the rules and the regulations across the country. I don't know what the different states are. I know that where my friend, mutual friend of ours, is in North Carolina, like many women there are not allowed to have home births. Like, no one's talking about that, right? But then so those people are forced to go to the hospital, and they're forced to get that care if they decide to go through with it. A lot of people are still having care. So let's talk about this fear around it, the reality, and also the hope that is possible.
What are you hoping for?
My hope is that by addressing women's health and maternal health from the beginning, that women are maybe women are able to have healthier pregnancies to begin with. They might miscarry less often. Obviously, I'm not saying that miscarriages aren't normal or whatever. Women have miscarried forever, but what can we do to prevent all of these things? Sometimes it's because maybe we're not taking care of ourselves. Maybe we're stressed. Maybe there's other things involved. How are we eating? What type of care did we have beforehand? What vaccines have we gotten? There's a lot that has gone into our maternal mortality rates going up so high. Yeah. And right now we're sitting there talking about not having access to proper care once an issue occurs, but no one's talking about giving women the care that they actually need so that more people can be healthier overall. Yeah. And have the higher health outcomes overall.
Right.
But yeah.
Right. We're very short-sighted, I think, in how we the avenues through which we offer support to women are very short-sighted. Just leave it like that. And what I find to be the hardest part of this conversation around abortion is, just like everything in this political sort of dichotomy of good and evil, and by the way, by the end of this conversation, I don't think anybody out there will be able to guess who I voted for. And that should be okay. That should be okay for people. I have done many abortions. I have supported abortions in states in which people are not supposed to be supporting abortions. I have considered even stockpiling some medications to offer that in the event that it becomes impossible to get those medications. I am through and through. Am I allowed to curse on your show?
You can do whatever you want on my show. Okay. And say whatever you
I don't give a shit what any federal, state, or local policymaker has to say about the care for women. Because I did not go to medical school with the intention of taking care of people as long as they follow some conditions that were written by some suit in a state capitol or in our federal government. I think that the conversation around abortion is so tricky because I was just speaking to Sarah Rosser, my friend, and the co-creator on the Born Free Method, and she lives part-time in Florida, part-time in Tennessee. And in Tennessee, there's no way, absolutely, to get any sort of abortion care. Florida's the same way, but if you know, those listening probably are aware, if you're in one of the states, in one of many states that kind of swings right or left, with a couple exceptions, Florida being one of them, there was a specific piece of legislation that was offered in addition to choose your president and your vice president and all the senators and all that. They wanted to know what you think about abortion. And I don't know the exact language of this particular bill that was you know, kind of floated into the electorate in Florida. But Sarah told me that when she walked into the polling station, this little thing there was like, hey, do you support this or not? Do you vote yes or no? And they needed a 60% vote. They only got like a 57. But this would have made abortion less restrictive in the state of Florida. Well, what they did on the poll, on the document that I think everybody has paper documents. I don't know if it's all electronic in some states, but in Kentucky, it's all paper. And you literally take a pen and you have to like fill in a bubble. And in Florida, I think it's the same. So there was in all caps. It's sort of like a, hey, by the way, not in small print, in actually extra large print, this will dramatically increase the amount of abortions being performed in Florida. Something along those lines. So it didn't matter actually that what a person actually felt. They were pulling on their heartstrings by saying, do you want a whole bunch of babies being killed? Essentially is what they were saying. And if not, then vote no. That's essentially what they were saying. And to me, that is an act of violence on the psyche of the electorate. It's coercive. It makes you feel really bad if you don't say no. And still, 57% of Florida voters said they were in favor of less restrictive abortion laws. So when you look at some other states, now it didn't pass in Florida, but when you see that there's actually a majority of voters in even the most restrictive states, most of the time, they are voting in favor of less restrictive abortion laws. And that's because most of us want less people telling us what to do. The problem I have from the sort of when you take a big step back is that this is not a black or white issue. And at the heart of this issue is that Nikki, is it Bostwick is how you say her last name? So Nikki Bostwick walks into my clinic, and it is not my job to tell her what she should or shouldn't do, what she can or can't do. That's not a part of the deal. Unless you walk in and you're high as a kite and you need emergency surgery, and it's like, I can't get her. She doesn't understand up from down, let alone that she's bleeding excessively from her nose and we need to go and fix it or something, right? But that's not going to be the case. You have the ability to make a decision for yourself. I give you the information, risks, benefits, alternatives to doing the thing, not doing the thing, and then supporting you in your decision. That's supposed to be my job. And I went to all this school in order to have the full armament of appreciation for what these various things mean. If you decide not to do the thing that I would recommend or that I actually would do if it was me, and I'm not okay with that, I need to go for therapy or at least get out of the field and go somewhere else. Well, here's the magic trick. In the case of most OBGYNs, who at least all the ones that are on Instagram and whatnot, we're all like, you got to vote Kamala. You got to vote Harris Waltz. You got to do this if you care about women's reproductive health. A woman has the right to choose what happens to her body and informed consent and all these things. And yet, when you look away from abortion and you look to every other aspect of women's health, OBGYNs think you're an absolute asshole if you violate any part of their recommendations. They only believe in informed consent if it aligns with their personal values and preferences. So here's where our trust gets further degraded. They don't believe you, Dr. So-and-so with 1 million followers on Instagram. They don't believe you when you say that vote this way if you value informed consent. Because you don't represent informed consent. You represent coercion and sometimes harm that's kind of sugar-coated as a means of like, hey, I'm just gotta do this to make sure your baby's okay. Or hey, you don't want your baby to die, right? It's coercion. It's sugar-coated as soft and tender, compassionate care. But really, they're coercing you to do things. And the myriad of incentives or disincentives to change the system is very, very hard to unpack. And we won't get to that here. But I'm telling these stories so that people can appreciate just how You are like, this is like almost like mind control. This is very manipulative.
Yeah, the whole thing is mind control.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
World where, and it's happening on both sides. It's not like, whatever side you chose isn't involved in some sort of mind control, because that's, why only a two-party system can win in this country. And, and it goes beyond just our country too.
Yeah.
But
like an international thing.
Even on like just talking about, we're home birth. And like what you're saying is like, that's crazy to so many people in this country. I don't know the stats. What are the stats? How many people have a home birth?
It's somewhere between 1% and 2% in our country. Yeah, it's very, very few.
That's why they think you're crazy. And then how many of those people go on to have a free birth?
That's a good question.
Free birth is looked at like, even I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I maybe by my third pregnancy now, right? But like looking at someone who's going to have a free birth for their first pregnancy, like congratulations to them to have that much trust in themselves and their partner or just themselves. Like that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think like instead of poo-pooing it on them, just like how can I support this person and this is the decision that they made. Maybe instead of adding fear to it, I can find ways to support them, whatever they need.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're doing. Like that's what you're doing.
Yeah. It's actually, it's much easier to read the literature and then give you the pill than it is to actually make a person truly feel safe.
Yeah.
Let's talk about is it okay if we talk about safety just for a second?
Yes. Yeah.
A lot of people, you live in a great, you're in like the Santa Barbara area. Do I recall that correct?
I'm in Laguna Beach, so south of LA.
Oh, Laguna Beach. Right. That's Dr. Habib is up there, up near Ojai. Yeah. So, you're in Laguna Beach. You've got a lot of surfers. If you ask most people who don't know how to surf, is surfing unsafe? Like, yeah, if you get your 60-year-old grandmother for the first time ever in the ocean try to get her up on a surfboard, she's probably going to get hurt. I've had some of my friends who are like former pro surfers, they get totally wrecked and they've been on a surfboard for like 1,000 times. So surfing is it safe or is it unsafe? I ride a motorcycle. Is that safe or is it unsafe? This notion of safety is a really interesting thought exercise where, most people would say it's, we're doing these things in the name of safety, but you have to qualify safety. We have to actually talk about what does a person mean when they say this intervention or this surgery is safe? What does that actually mean? Is this medication safe? And hospitals have done a really, really beautiful job over the past 100 years of advertising and marketing around this concept of safety. But what I really try to help people appreciate is it's an illusion of safety. If you walk into a hospital and then are able to go home and you're still alive, you're like, wow, gosh, you could look at it as I survived the hospital, given the number of errors that we make and the number of unnecessary surgeries and inductions in the childbirth space, given that we're not giving we're not able to elicit full informed consent if we don't give the risks or downsides to interventions like vaccines or birth control. And again, it's not my job to tell Nikki what she should do. It's me saying, hey, here's what I know and here's what I don't know. Whatever you want to do, let me see if I can support you in that way. That would be really awesome medicine, but we're not doing that. Instead, we say, hey, this is the only place to have a baby. It's safe to have a baby here. The problem is women are not having free births because they're stupid, because they're irresponsible, because they're just hoping their baby dies. That's the fear. That's the hospital staff's fear. What if you need emergency surgery? The free birthers, I have a lot of admiration for them. And if I was going to have a baby, I would probably have a free birth because it's a radical expression of self, of life itself. You know what I mean? Like, I decided to do this for myself, knowing that there's a good chance I might not even make it through this. And I'm not saying you have a high risk of your baby dying. I'm saying it is literally a leap of faith. And that requires you to really grapple with mortality. That is the most alive, for lack of better terms, expression of life itself. It's rich, it's juicy, and it's scary as hell to jump off a bridge with a rope tied to your feet. But man, do you feel alive afterwards. The free birth thing is not about the adrenaline. It's not just about the radical autonomy and the transformation that can come through deciding once and for all, for yourself, your fate. It also is, unfortunately, because women feel like that's safer than being in the hands of our hospitals. And that's what these doctors that are posting these things like, help me understand. They don't feel safe with you. Like how?
Yeah. You told them to get a COVID vaccine while they were pregnant.
Right. You told them to take this random thing, and you said you'd give them a donut for it. Like that, you sound like. And Nikki, honestly, for like 5 years now, whenever COVID was, it's like I really thought that they were just trying to fool us. I was like, they can't possibly not see this, and unfortunately, they don't. They really don't see it.
No, they don't see it. And that's it. It's terrible that they don't see it, but I don't know. I guess it's like this is like a rapid fire question I wanted to ask you, but it's like colleges are paid for by the very people. Like, I mean, it goes back. Like the fact that you see it differently is wild as a double board certified doctor. Yeah. Right? Because the whole education system was co-opted to begin with. That's so right. How can they see it differently? They can't. It's not even their fault. And we have all these other things that are causing us to not see things clearly too, with our health just in general. Yeah. Yeah. And like the parasites and all the things that are in our bodies that are like reflective of what's outside too. And like we have to clear out what's inside to really see more clearly on the outside. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, okay, it also goes into like, okay, not only did they recommend the COVID vaccine, let's talk about C-sections, right? Sure. Like, and what they tell you. So the reason they think home births are not good either or unsafe is because they, what if you have to have an emergency C-section? What if the baby's breached? Well, you're here talking about twins being breached, but most people don't have the the experience anymore. They're not even taught how to care for someone. So that's why. So I want to hear like your thoughts on like most of the reasons why C-sections are unnecessary, like emergency C-sections. Like, what are some of the things that they're saying are a reason to get an emergency C-section that would still be unnecessary if they were properly trained? Yeah. That's a great question. And the reason. So Born Free Method is the online support program. Birth workers can enroll, families can enroll. You get that lifetime support I described. We then use the Born Free name, and we were like, we want to do something just for birth workers in person. And we've done this now twice, 2 years in a row. We had the Born Free Twins Breach Conference, where we bring midwives and doctors from around the world to help retrain and reskill people in this lost art of vaginal breech birth, which, for those who aren't aware, like a baby is butt down 3 to 4% of the time at 37 weeks. So it's very easy to analogize this to, let's say, I don't know, like a car mechanic. If you go to mechanic school and you like do everything but the wheels, you're not really a mechanic. Like you have to do the whole thing. You can't say, well, you could specialize in certain things, but you still have the skills to work on the wheels. You might be the carburetor specialist, but you can do the whole car. OBGYNs have become unskilled, and midwives are becoming better skilled in this vaginal breech thing. The big concern, of course, is that the baby's head's going to get stuck, which is not necessarily what we've seen over time. But how did we even get here, right? For about 30 years or so, it was already falling out of fashion for babies to come out, for women to be permitted to give birth butt first. Now, of course, they still have to consent to the C-section, right? But the doctors would say, you don't want that. Your baby's going to die. So women, of course, would consent to C-section. And we saw less and less babies coming out butt first.
until the sort of final nail in the coffin for the training of obstetricians was submitted in manuscript form in about I think it was year 2000, late in the year 2000, to The Lancet, which is one of the largest, most respected peer-reviewed journals in the world. This was a multi-center, meaning many, many different types of people, different types of hospitals in different countries. Thousands of women were looked at here and enrolled. And the decision tree was very easy. We're going to do a randomized control trial here. And when you come in, we're either going to do a C-section for your baby, or we're going to just see what happens when the baby comes out vaginally. And the results were not in favor of vaginal breech. They had, more babies died in the vaginal breech birth. We had lower APGAR scores, which is how we kind of score a baby's transition to the outside environment after they've come out of the uterus. We had higher NICU admissions. We had all that type of stuff. We also had, of course, we had now the final sort of one ring to rule them all, one study to rule them all, which effectively made it impossible as an OBGYN trainee to get these skills. And midwifery care, which has kind of been co-opted by the legislators in favor of the obstetrics model for childbirth, they've kind of followed in suit. So that was, 24 years ago. I was a very young, strapping young lad back then. It was then that we saw this precipitous decline. And with that came a resultant increase in C-sections. And when you do one C-section on a person, that puts them at risk for a variety of other things happening later in life. So when we only look at whether or not your baby dies, perhaps the term breech trial was pretty important that we did that. Here's the issue with the term breech trial, Nikki, which is that when they looked at the data, so when these manuscripts get submitted and they become these, phenomenally if they become viral in the medical community, they don't necessarily, the critics, even the peer reviewers, don't necessarily have access to the raw data at that time. But later, that raw data becomes available and we can look at it more closely. And it turns out there were some twins. There were some babies that were head down, randomized to the breech group. There was one baby that was already dead by the time they gave birth, and that was in the breech group. We had some babies with anomalies. And if you were to take all of those out, we had a wash between the two. But then we've also repeated this. We've done similar trials in countries where doctors are still trained in the maneuvers to relieve an occasional dystocia, meaning the head's kind of caught around the neck or the baby's kind of stuck side, sort of like cockeyed in the pelvis, and you need to give a little bit of assistance to get them straight and narrow. In countries where they're still training doctors to do this, there's almost no difference between the two groups. And we've saved that woman a massive abdominal surgery, which when we consider it's just mom and baby alive, that's one thing. That's what the term breech trial tried to do. And that's not a bad approach. The issue is that there's far more that's important to the woman giving birth than just am I alive and is my baby alive? So we have the recovery after a C-section. We have, again, the risks to future pregnancies, including abnormal placentation, meaning the placenta doesn't form right, or it grows into the wall of the uterus, grows over the cervix, and now you have a placenta previa. It doesn't look at the impacts on breastfeeding. It doesn't look at, how much time and money is lost because you can't, walk for a few days, or you can't get back to work in time. What does that do to the relationship? What does that do to the attention you can give to your other children? I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And there's benefits to babies coming out vaginally, whether it's butt first or head first. So if you consider all of those things, we probably can't make a great argument that we stop teaching doctors and midwives to do these procedures. But Sarah Rosser and I wanted to make that, it possible for us to continue to pass these skills down. And I'm not the teacher at that conference. I'm there as a learner. I just happen to organize it. And so we bring in all these great doctors and midwives and even attorneys talking about the medical legal ramifications, and trauma-informed anesthesiologists to talk about how horrific it really is for a person to have a C-section, and anything we can do to reduce these numbers is going to be really critical. And it went off it was just such a huge success. And it was also so much work that we will be doing another one. but it'll probably be in 2025 or in 2026, I should say. And it's going to be a slow ratcheting up of trying to get people confident enough to attend vaginal breech again. But it's really the midwives that are carrying the torch.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are willing and honestly, like, capable, because the doctors have been conditioned to believe that this is not safe. I haven't seen a baby yet get stuck with their head stuck and the body, head just can't come out. It doesn't happen in the preterm babies, maybe, but man, in those term babies, they do great. Yeah.
That's a huge deal that you're keeping that going. It's so important. I'm so glad. That makes me so happy.
Yeah.
Okay, so some of the other I wanted to ask you. I really want to talk about hysterectomies.
Sure.
Because that's like another thing I'm not anywhere near there, but I want to talk about this because I feel like every woman I know past a certain age is just getting a hysterectomy or has gotten one. Or my own mother, like, she didn't naturally go into menopause. She just went in and it wasn't even like consensual. They had to go in for something else, and then they just were like, oh, and we did this, and now you no longer have a period. Yeah. And she's like, wait, what? I mean, I have no reference point for what's normal. Yeah. Because everyone I know just has a hysterectomy. Why is that happening? Is that just like another thing, like a C-section? Like, you should just get this. It's easier. Sure. People are elected for it. It's like an elective surgery. So what's going on there?
Man, that is a great question. So so when people think of, they call us OBs. Oh, the OB said this. Well, there's another part of our title. It's actually a longer part. It's the GYN part. And when you go into medical school, a lot of people don't know. Let me just tell people what it means to become a doctor. You go to college. This is in the United States. You go to college. I took 5 years because I wanted to get extra majors and things. And I was a Spanish student. I was a Spanish literature student, not the biology, undergrad. You get through that and you start to apply for medical schools after taking a big bad test called the MCAT. It's the Medical College Admissions Test. It's a very hard test. I don't know if I had a pretty good score. I don't even know if that score would have been good enough to get in now because it's so competitive. You go to your med school. I got accepted to I was going on interviews and I got accepted to one at Temple in Philly. And I just canceled the others because I had no money to be traveling all over and staying in hotels and all that. But I went to Temple. You spend 2 years studying your ass off, then 2 years in your clinical and surgical rotations, trying to get a little bit of everything. You graduate from there and then your training begins. You've done the prerequisites, you've gone through the passage, you get your MD on your chest, and now you pick a specialty, which the match system itself is kind of crazy, but you ultimately get matched up with a program after interviewing, and they interview you, and they rank you, and you rank them, and bam, I landed in LA. You do 4 years, 100-hour work weeks for 4 years, and it absolutely cripples you. If you want to do more, you go for a fellowship. I did 1 year of fellowship at UCSD. It was a 1-year program in palliative care and hospice. So you ultimately finish that and you decide you're going to do something good in the world. But when you're in that residency and in your actual specialty training, it's about 30% of your time that's really spent in the obstetrics wing. The rest is done doing the clinical stuff on everything from abnormal periods to painful periods to leakage of urine to prolapse symptoms to a lot of primary care stuff, diabetes, hypertension, that type of thing. And then the bulk of your time really is spent in the operating room. It's probably about 70% of your time is spent doing surgery, including C-sections, which is technically on the obstetrics part of your training, but you're a surgeon. And, you're not quite the type of surgeon that is a general surgeon where you're operating on abscesses and all kinds of stuff out on the outside of the body or even the inside of the body. You're the pelvic surgeon. So Nikki walks into my clinic and you have a particular problem. There's always a possibility that surgery will be the easiest way to take care of your issue. If we change the language there a little bit, you walk into the maternity unit, a C-section will almost always be an option in the back of your head as the easiest way to take care of a problem. When you get really, really good at using a hammer, you just find nails. You just look around for every time that you want to bang. Can I bang on this? Can I bang on this? And that's kind of what I think OBGYNs, the gynecologist side of us, that's, I think, the reason that we feel so compelled about the hysterectomy. But there's more to this. And if we want to get a little esoteric here, how many children do you have, Nikki?
2.
You have 2. How old are they?
6 and 3.
Okay, so 6 years ago. Any other pregnancies that you care to disclose? Okay. So you have roughly the same age as my kids. We have a nearly 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. So 6 years ago, something magical happened inside of you where probably through a very lovely encounter, you and your presumably male partner, you embraced, and a whole bunch of semen was taken into your body and fired its way up into your reproductive system in search for a little globe, just floating through space. And this like sunshine just fires its way through like hyperspace, like in Spaceballs, shooting through space, surrounds this little orb, your egg, bangs into it in every which way. The thing starts rotating, and then suddenly there's an explosion, and a sperm is engulfed, and the genetic material starts to copy itself and divide and divide and divide. And then after so many days, it starts to fold in on itself. And all this magical stuff happens within your womb. The Eastern mystics, the Eastern philosophists, they would describe the body in different ways. This was way before we were able to cut open the body. But they would describe the chakra systems and the meridians in Chinese medicine and all these other really elegant ways of thinking about the body. Steiner gives us the 4-fold and 3-fold man, where we consider, there's a life force energy, and then there's actually like a soul level, and then there's the ego consciousness. And these are impacting your nerve sensing systems and your rhythmic systems and your metabolic will systems in various ways. And it's this kind of orchestration that creates life. But in medicine, I never once got an answer to that little magical thing happening inside of your womb. I never got an answer as to what that was. And this is not a conversation around abortion. This is, what is life? What is the difference between something that is living and not living? We know it, we see it, and we know it, but what is it? How do we put language to that? That's a very, very, very deep, difficult question to answer. But the reason I'm telling you this is that when a woman walks in, we see, hey, you're done with having babies? Why don't we just get rid of that whole thing? And one little mini story that I can tell about this is, I was covering a practice in Encinitas, California before I moved out to Kentucky. And the guy, the doctor who I was covering for, he said, by the way, I've got a tubal coming up, which used to mean we tied the tubes. Now it means we remove the tubes. Yeah, I've got a tubal coming up on Monday. Are you okay with doing that? I was like, yeah, no problem. I'll finish my shift. I'll do the surgery and I'll head home. So I did the surgery. And later he was like, hey, by the way, that lady that I had consented for the tubal, she was really upset because you took her tubes out. And I said, well, yeah, that's the standard of care. And he was like, yeah, I hadn't made it clear that that's what we were going to do. I thought maybe you just remove a portion. I was like, that wasn't communicated to me. The consent didn't reflect that. The standard of care is to remove it because it actually reduces your lifetime risk of ovarian cancer by removing the tubes. But my immediate gut feeling was, well, what's the difference? There's a huge difference because somebody removed a part of her body and now she feels like an aching, a longing for that part of her body. And that moment stuck with me because it was like, oh my gosh, there is a reason that you have your uterus and your tubes and your ovaries. And it's not just to have babies. It's not just to be producing hormones, premenopausally. It's more than that. There's actually a reason you have this collection of organs, which was created by the soul, the astral forces of the body. It was created in your mother's womb for a reason. And it was not just to pass on your genes. This is the center of your life force energy. And so when you walk into the office, I'm the surgeon with the hammer and I see there's a nail. Nikki, you're done with having kids. Do you want to consider having a hysterectomy?
I don't know why I'm being so emotional over this. Keep going.
I'm not trying to make you cry. I'm trying to articulate what can't be articulated in our mainstream conventional way of looking at women. So you come in and you're 47 or so, whatever, it doesn't really matter. The average age, for those wondering, is a median age is about 51 and a half. But you're 47, your periods are all helter-skelter. And maybe you're okay with the hysterectomy, but maybe you're not. I don't know that until I get to know you and I really understand who you are. If you're that good at surgery, you could take out any uterus, no problem. I don't do hysterectomies anymore because I really honestly don't like doing surgery. It's like shame on me. I went into a surgical field not knowing how much surgery I was going to be doing. But one of my attendings had told me, he said, I pride myself on not doing very many surgeries anymore. Like, what if I could find some other ways to help this person? And I'm so good at what I do that I can almost invariably keep them out of the operating room. So that made me think, well, maybe I don't have to be a surgeon. Maybe I can actually help take care of people and recognize them for who they are. This is the womb that carried your babies. Not everybody has to have a baby to feel like a woman, but damn it, if that's not a really beautiful thing, a special power that you, Nikki, every woman born with a uterus that you carry. And there's a deep grieving there in our society for not being recognized as just how special this is. And we don't need any more pseudo-profound language around the chakras or around consciousness and everything. You feel it. We don't need language. We don't need books. We don't need Deepak to lay out some more tweets about how important it is that we're conscious beings. Like, you feel that. And I was finding that when I slowed the conversation down and I just sat with people and I said, like, how is this really impacting your life? It's actually not about the bleeding. It wasn't about the pain. It was, they feel like something is changing, and that is very scary. So just like I imagine my little girls, I have 2 little girls. I don't know. Do you have girls or boys? You have one of each. So my little girls are going to start having puberty in the coming decade. And I'm utterly terrified for myself because I don't want them to ever feel shame or to feel any regret about the fact that they're going to menstruate. And mother culture is going to tell them otherwise. But there's a special magical power in our children and our little girls and little boys. I only know my little girls, but they have this incredible gift that is in alignment with the rhythms of nature, and it changes on a 28 to 30 day cycle. Everything from the way that their nervous system to their endocrine system to their mood to their sleep, everything changes in a beautiful rhythm, just like the seasons, just like the days, just like the tides. And I'm being compelled as an OB/GYN to tell them, you don't need to do that. Take this little pill. And I don't even have to reach far. I have it right here. We do the same thing in the menopausal space. It's around abnormal bleeding because we have no idea how to sit with rites of passage. As OB/GYNs, we have never seen childbirth, many of us, as a rite of passage, as a spiritual transformation, where if one foot is in the grave, you're not even there. So for me to expect you to be able to sign paperwork on the risks and benefits of this C-section that you would need if you would, don't want your baby to die, like it's the completely wrong paradigm. So it starts when you're a little girl, Nikki, and it amplifies in childbirth. And some people don't even feel appreciative of their magic well into their menopausal years. And that to me is the greatest disservice that I think we've ever done to the human race, to be frank.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like you're saying, it's not just about giving birth. It's about our intuition lies in our wombs. So of course, if we're not connected because we're trained as little girls to not be, because we're trained to be ashamed, then we're willing to give that up.
Yeah.
Obviously it's not black and white like that. There are other issues that come into play, but I feel that for the most part. And your story just made me really emotional because it was beautiful. Thank you. The moment to be able to, and I've heard this from Zach Bush too. And I just to be able to recall the moment where you just kind of were oh, that's what I just did. And maybe that's not what I feel connected to do anymore. I love it. I Anyways, I know we're like getting short on time, but I'd love to talk to you, do like a little rapid fire with like a few things. Chiropractic care or pelvic care if you had to choose?
Did you say chiropractic or pelvic?
Yeah. Just like
what are we trying to achieve here?
You like don't think too far into it, but if you were like on a whim, like if you were pregnant and you were, working the pelvic floor to open things up, or like you only had one option, chiropractic or pelvic.
I think most people are going to get the most benefit from the chiropractic care.
Okay, cool.
I think pelvic, this is rapid fire. So to say pelvic PT is a game-changing option that is very hard to find in its best form. I'll just say that. Okay,
cool. Okay, castor oil or yoni steaming? For induction.
Yoni steaming for sure. Castor oil is a nightmare.
Yes, okay, cool. Would you do a chicken pox party?
Yeah, I would.
Like, I always wonder, I'm like, it's so funny because, anyways, that's like, I don't know if I want to even share that out loud because you never know who's listening to this podcast. But like in this day and age too, it's like so hard to find the wild virus, I feel like.
Yeah, getting it naturally. Well, let me comment on this because the best articulation I have found around immunizations and childhood development is actually through Steiner. Again, this is like an early 20th century, before World War II. He's Austrian. He's just speaking off the cuff, and then he just dies after giving like 10,000 lectures. He like literally was like, see ya, and he peaced out. He had said some really interesting things around the use of immunizations without spiritual education was actually the biggest problem. So getting them later in life is fine. Like from my standpoint, actually, it's fine if it didn't have aluminum and polysorbate 80 and all this junk in it. The concept of immunization to me is beautiful. The issue is that this little child doesn't have a well-established ego within this fourfold system. Again, it's the physical, etheric, astral ego, these energetic bodies. The ego isn't really quite sure what it's doing there yet. That doesn't happen until like age 28. And so when you put a foreign substance in there, whether it's some plant or animal-derived, usually animal-derived or yeast-derived substance, it draws the ego's attention there, and the ego then neglects all the other functions of the ego within the body, which is a very it's preservational of the self, but it's also helping to sculpt and craft what this child's going to become. So I don't like carte blanche think that vaccines are a bad idea. I think that vaccinating young children is a problem. And I'll just leave it at that. I could go on and on about this, but hopefully
that's a really good point.
Yeah.
So I was gonna say this just to like put you on the spot, which is like I wouldn't want either. Vaccine or antibiotic?
Oh gosh. There's almost never a slam dunk reason for me to recommend a vaccination. There are good uses for antibiotics. Like if you've got like a bad infection that's going to go into your blood and kill you, we can fix that with antibiotics. This kind of teeters into that like germ theory is wrong. Like no, germ theory is not wrong. The way that we're advertising vaccines as if viruses are all out to get us, that's wrong. That's the component of germ theory that I think is terrible.
I completely agree with that too. Yeah. I grapple on that because I really want to learn a lot more about German new medicine too.
Yeah, I love just pontificating through the lens of GNM. Yeah.
But I think that everything kind of has a place, and it's really like our own fear around it all that we need to let go so that we really have this like informed consent.
Yeah, totally.
Well, thank you for joining us. It was so fun to have you, and I hope to have you on again. And we'll just keep the conversation going.
My pleasure, Nikki. Thank you so much.
Thank you.